Have you ever been standing somewhere high up, like maybe looking over the railing of a balcony?
Oh, yeah. Got
Or you're standing near a cliff edge, and out of absolutely nowhere, you get this sudden, just inexplicable urge to jump.
right. It's terrifying.
It is. Or, you're driving down a perfectly straight highway, and for a split second, your brain says, what if I just jerked the steering wheel into oncoming traffic right now?
Just intrusive thoughts hitting you out of the blue.
Exactly. It's that directionless pull that the French call l'appel du vide, the call of the void. But what if I told you that feeling, that terrifying intrusive thought, wasn't actually your thought at all?
I mean, that completely dismantles how we've been taught to view our own minds.
Right. What if you are walking around right now, intercepting a planetary signal,
Yeah.
but you're doing it with a broken biological antenna?
We just walk around assuming that every single sensation, every anxiety, every random thought popping into our heads is being independently generated by us inside our own skulls.
Yeah, that it's all just me, me, me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you start looking at the physical architecture of the planet and the actual mechanics of how biological systems communicate, that assumption falls apart incredibly fast.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking that exact feeling, that terrifying call of the void, and we're tracing it all the way down to the bottom of the ocean to show you that reality just doesn't work the way you think it does.
It really doesn't.
We are synthesizing an absolutely massive stack of research today. I mean, we are pulling from oceanography, acoustic physics, ancient cultural cybernetics. We're even looking at modern electronic warfare.
Which sounds completely disconnected, but it's not.
Not at all. It all points to a radical, unified theory of reality. Some of the researchers in our sources call it the state machine. Others call it the loom.
And our goal today is to connect these dots for you. We're going to decode the underlying mechanics that govern everything from, well, the long-distance navigation of blue whales to the algorithms dictating what you see on your phone to your own mental health.
Because they're all running on the exact same architecture. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how the whole system works, we can't start with the human brain. We have to start downward.
Right, we need to go into the deepest, most compressed environment on Earth,
The bottom of the ocean.
which is the perfect place to start.
Mm.
I mean, we tend to think of the ocean as just a giant bowl of water. You jump in, it's wet, you swim around.
Yeah.
But structurally and physically, the ocean is a layered compression machine.
Yeah.
It is an architecture made up of distinct phase spaces.
Wait, phase spaces. Let's define that, because phase space sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but this is pure physics.
It is. Think about the transition between ice, liquid water, and steam.
Okay.
It is the exact same chemical substance, H2O, but depending on the energy state, the physics completely change.
Right, the rules of reality change. You can't swim through ice.
Exactly. The ocean has boundaries built into it that function very similarly.
Mm.
As you go deeper, you hit what are called thermoclines. These are sharp, dramatic temperature gradients.
Like invisible walls in the water.
Literally, the water on one side of a thermocline behaves differently than the water on the other side. They act as genuine physical walls. Sound, for instance, literally bounces off these invisible layers in the water.
So it's essentially an invisible acoustic highway trapped between two layers of physics.
Precisely. And because of those phase walls, the Earth naturally constructed an internet, a planetary signal bus. It's called the SOFAR channel, SOFAR, which stands for sound fixing and ranging.
How does that actually work mechanically? Because, water is just water, right? How does it trap sound?
The mechanics are beautiful. So the SOFAR channel sits at roughly 600 to 1,000 meters deep.
Okay.
As you go deeper in the ocean, two opposing forces are at war. First, the temperature is dropping, and cold water slows sound down.
Right.
But simultaneously, the water pressure from all the massive weight above it is increasing, and high-pressure speeds sound up.
Okay, let me make sure I have this. So cold slows it down, but pressure speeds it up.
Exactly. And right at that 600 to 1,000 meter mark, those two opposing forces perfectly canceled each other out.
Wow.
They create what's called a velocity minimum. Sound travels slower in this specific band of water than anywhere else in the entire ocean.
And because of how physics works, sound waves always bend toward the medium where they travel the slowest. I remember learning this in optics, like with light bending through glass.
Yes. Refraction.
Right. So if a sound is generated in the SOFAR channel and tries to travel up to the surface, the warmer water bends it back down.
Yeah.
And if it tries to travel down to the ocean floor, the intense pressure bends it back up. It just can't escape.
It becomes trapped in a natural acoustic waveguide, A sound pulse injected into the SOFAR channel can travel for thousands and thousands of miles horizontally with almost zero loss of energy.
That is wild.
It is a planetary routing layer that the Earth built before biology even existed.
Which is where the blue whales come in. This part of the research completely blew my mind. Blue whales operate at a frequency of 10 to 40 hertz, which is massive, deep bass.
So deep we can't even hear it.
Right, it's below the floor of human hearing. For a long time, marine biologists just assumed these were social calls. Like, hey, I'm over here, let's mate.
Sure, basic communication.
But the research we're looking at today says they aren't just talking to each other, they are using the ocean floor's geology as an acoustic map.
Yeah. If we zoom out and look at the physics of a 20 hertz sound wave, the wavelength is massive. We are talking tens of meters long.
So big.
Right. When a blue whale fires that acoustic pulse into the SOFAR channel, it travels for hundreds of miles, and it physically bounces off geological structures. Continental shelves, underwater ridges, deep sea mounts.
And because massive geological features don't move.
Exactly. The interference pattern of those echoes returning to the whale is totally, completely stable.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm grasping this. It means whales aren't just communicating with their pod. They are pinging a planetary router. It reminds me of how birds navigate. We know that migratory birds use quantum spin in these specific proteins in their eyes, cryptochromes, to literally see or feel the Earth's magnetic fields.
Right, they are reading a planetary infrastructure.
So whales are doing something similar, but instead of magnetics, they are using acoustic interference patterns to read the geology.
They are reading a map that the Earth printed, and they use magnetite crystals in their own tissue as the receiver.
Wow.
And what's truly fascinating here is that the whales didn't invent this system. The map selected for the organism.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the SOFAR channel existed for hundreds of millions of years before whales even evolved. So any random genetic mutation that caused an ancient early whale ancestor to drop its vocalization into that exact 10 to 40 hertz range.
Oh, they suddenly received a massive evolutionary advantage.
Exactly. They got free, global, long-range signal coupling.
Yeah.
They evolved their hardware to fit the Earth's physical infrastructure.
But because the SOFAR channel is just a physical layer of the ocean, it's an open network. Like, there's no password protection.
Anyone to use it.
And this is where the research gets into the great unresolved acoustic mysteries of the deep. Like the 52 hertz whale. Have you heard of this?
The loneliest whale in the world.
Yeah. It was first detected in 1989. It travels completely alone, and it calls at a frequency no other known whale uses. Or the famous bloop from 1997.
Oh, remember the bloop?
It was this massive, ultra-low frequency sound recorded across the Pacific that was louder than any known biological source. Now, I know the NOAA later attributed the bloop to an ice quake, like glaciers cracking, but the initial biological signature of these sounds has sparked an incredibly wild speculative theory in these notes.
It's the mimicry hypothesis.
It's so creepy.
It really is. The theory proposes that because the SOFAR channel is unencrypted, anyone or anything can broadcast on it. If there is a substrate entity, something ancient and highly adapted, living deep in the extreme compression zones of the ocean.
It wouldn't need to physically chase surface prey to survive.
Right. You would just need to inject a false signal into the SOFAR channel, a signal that perfectly mimics a familiar acoustic landmark or a mating call to lure whales off their attractor map.
A deep-sea monster spoofing the planetary router to catch a whale. That is terrifying.
It is the ultimate phishing scam.
But whether there is actually an ancient mimic down there or not, the vulnerability of the network is 100% confirmed. And we know this because humans accidentally hacked it.
We did, through military low-frequency active sonar, or LFA sonar.
Right.
The military uses these massive arrays to scan for submarines, and they operate in these exact same ultra-low frequency ranges.
Okay.
So when a Navy task force blasts LFA sonar, they are basically flooding the SOFAR channel with acoustic white noise.
Wait, so when we see these tragic mass strandings of whales washing up on beaches, I always thought it was because the sonar was so loud it was physically deafening them, like making their ears bleed.
I mean, that can happen at extremely close range, but the wider phenomenon is much more profound. The LFA sonar completely overwrites the whale's attractor map.
Oh, wow.
The interference patterns they rely on to know where the deep ocean ends and the shallow beach begins, they're wiped out. They mass strand because their planetary navigation system has been jammed. They are flying blind in a phase space they rely on for survival.
And if we look at where a hypothetical deep-sea mimic could even survive, we have to talk about the Hadal depths. We are talking 11 kilometers down at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
That is 1,100 atmospheres of pressure.
That isn't just dark water. That is a completely different physical reality.
Exactly. The physics of water fundamentally shift at 1,100 atmospheres. It acts as a genuinely different expression filter for biology. Chemical reactions that are totally impossible at the surface become viable down there.
Right, the way proteins fold changes.
It acts as a high-pressure mutation lab for life.
The research even mentions sonoluminescence. I had to read this section like 3 times. Acoustic cavitation.
It sounds like magic, but it's real.
Sound waves moving through this immense pressure cause tiny bubbles in the water to collapse so violently that they emit flashes of light, like plasma temperature events happening inside microscopic collapsing bubbles at the bottom of the ocean.
Yes.
Sound is literally creating light and plasma.
Which creates an environment where biology doesn't have to follow surface rules at all. The notes explore the thing-like symbiote theory.
Like the John Carpenter movie.
Exactly like that. The idea that in this extreme pressure, you wouldn't find a centralized vertebrate animal like a fish. You would find highly adaptive, shape-shifting, distributed organisms.
Organisms that don't reproduce vertically from parent to child, but swap DNA horizontally with anything they touch.
Right, they would blur the line between a virus and a creature, adapting instantly to any signal they encounter.
Okay, so if whales are plugged into this planetary acoustic network, and they are incredibly vulnerable to false signals or noise that overwrites their reality, what about us?
This is a big question.
Are we walking around receiving signals from this phase space without even knowing it?
This raises the most important point about our own biological hardware. We are conditioned to view the human body as a single, centralized organism commanded by a dictator.
The brain.
Right, the brain sits in the skull and gives orders. But if you look at deep ocean biology, you see a very different architectural model that actually mirrors our own bodies more than we like to admit.
Okay, are you seriously going to compare the human body to a siphonophore? Because I read this part of the source material, and a Portuguese man-o'-war is a jellyfish. How does my nervous system have anything to do with a colony of ocean clones?
Well, it looks like a jellyfish, but it's not.
It's not.
No, that's the illusion of centralization. A siphonophore is actually a distributed colony of specialized clones called zooids. They all share the exact same DNA, but one clone decides to become the sail that floats on the surface.
Okay.
Other clones become the digestive system. Others become the tentacles. There is absolutely no central brain. Yet, they coordinate complex behaviors, they hunt, they even trigger synchronized bioluminescence across their entire massive structure. They operate on a shared collective field.
Okay, I see where you're going. Because if we apply that distributed architecture to humans, the brain isn't the dictator.
Exactly. The brain is not the only processor, it's just the loudest talker. It's the narrative generator. You are a modular array.
Let's look at the enteric nervous system, the nerves in your gut. It has roughly 500 million neurons.
Which is massive.
And it operates almost entirely autonomously. If the vagus nerve, which is the thick cable connecting your gut to your brain, if that is completely severed, your gut doesn't stop working.
Not at all.
It continues to run complex digestive functions, processing chemical gradients and pressure gradients completely independently.
And then there is the heart. This completely reframed biology for me.
I was taught the heart is just a mechanical pump.
We all were. But it has roughly 40,000 of its own intrinsic neurons. And more importantly, it is a massive electromagnetic broadcast node.
Yeah, the heart's electromagnetic field is... Wait, let me check my notes. It's 60 times stronger electrically than the brain's.
Right, and magnetically.
5,000 times stronger.
5,000, not 50. 5,000.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a human being with an electromagnetic sensor, the brain is just a faint hum. The primary broadcast node of the human body is the heart.
That is incredible.
The body is a collection of semi-autonomous modules. The gut, the heart, the peripheral nervous system, they're all running in parallel. And they're constantly sending signals upward to a brain that mostly just writes the story of what already happened.
Okay, so if we are a modular system broadcasting and receiving these massive electromagnetic fields, how do we interact with the planet's fields? This is where the research introduces the wood-plank coupling effect.
Yeah.
And I need you to explain this, because the difference between throughput and coupling seems to be the key to everything here.
It is the foundation. So throughput is like water moving through a pipe. The water goes from point A to point B, But the pipe itself remains completely unchanged. It's just a passive container.
Right.
But coupling means the medium itself participates.
Mm-hmm.
The signal modifies the medium, and then the medium feeds back into the systems.
The classic example they use in the sources is Christian Huygens and his pendulum clocks. This was in the 1600s.
A great historical example.
Yeah. He was sick in bed, staring at the wall, and he noticed that two of his newly invented pendulum clocks were swinging in perfect unison. He got up, messed up their timing so they were completely out of sync, and went back to bed.
And what happened?
A few hours later, they were perfectly synchronized again.
Because they were mounted on the same wooden beam. The wooden beam wasn't a passive pipe. The micro vibrations from the heavy pendulum of clock A traveled through the wood, slightly altered the wood's tension and state, and those vibrations pushed on clock B.
And clock B pushed back.
Yes, they shared a phase space. Through the wood, they negotiated a shared rhythm until they locked in.
And the research is saying that the wooden plank exists at a planetary scale?
It does.
For acoustic signals in the ocean, the SOFAR channel is the wooden plank coupling the whales. But for humans walking on land, the atmosphere acts as our wooden plank, specifically the Schumann resonance cavity.
Right. The space between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere acts as a massive electromagnetic cavity. Lightning strikes all over the globe act as the pendulum swings, charging the cavity.
And the fundamental resonant frequency of that cavity, the Schumann resonance, is 7.83 hertz.
And guess what biological system operates in that exact same ultra-low frequency range?
The human heart's electromagnetic field.
Exactly. We're quite literally sitting on the planetary wooden plank.
We are broadcasting into a frequency range where the planetary cavity is already vibrating. We are continually coupled to the Earth's electromagnetic field. You cannot isolate yourself from it.
But it's not just electromagnetic, it's acoustic too.
Right, and this brings us right back to the beginning, the call of the void, the sudden urge to jump. To understand this, we have to look at infrasound.
Sound waves below 20 hertz.
We cannot consciously hear them, but our bodies absolutely feel them.
This has been rigorously documented. There was a researcher named Vic Tandy at Coventry University. He and his team were working in a laboratory, and everyone started experiencing these bizarre symptoms.
Like what?
Extreme dread, cold sweats, feelings of depression, and they were even seeing gray, peripheral visual hallucinations. They literally thought the lab was haunted.
But Tandy was a rationalist, right? He started bringing in measurement equipment.
Yes, and what he found was an exhaust fan that was vibrating the air in the room, creating an 18.9 hertz standing acoustic wave.
And 18.9 hertz happens to be the exact resonant frequency of the human eyeball.
It's incredible.
You literally can't hear the sound, but your physical eyeball starts vibrating in its socket, which blurs your vision, creating the ghost, and sends massive panic signals down your optic nerve to your brain. Now expand that to the whole planet. The Earth is constantly producing infrasound. Massive storms building over the ocean, tectonic plates grinding, the crashing of ocean waves. The Earth is humming in the 0.1 to 20 hertz range all the time.
And if we look at this from an evolutionary perspective, ancient humans absolutely used these subtle infrasound and electromagnetic cues.
Sure.
If you were a hunter-gatherer, feeling a subtle 10 hertz vibration in your chest that tells you a massive low-pressure storm system is building 50 miles away is an incredible survival advantage.
It was a biological navigation system.
Exactly. But in the modern world, surrounded by the noise of cities, traffic, and our own digital anxieties, that system has completely atrophied.
We have a broken decoder. We are still receiving the planetary infrasound signals. The Earth is constantly shouting, hey, huge atmospheric pressure shift building up, or magnetic anomaly right here.
The signal hits our bodies, our modular organs feel it, but our broken antenna can't decode it as navigational data anymore.
So it just lands in our nervous system as directionless, heavy anxiety.
Or, to go back to the balcony.
Yes, the void.
If you are standing on a cliff edge, your body's physical sensors detect the massive acoustic and pressure void of the drop. The signal spikes immensely.
But your broken decoder panics. It doesn't know how to process a spatial void, so the translation error manifests as a sudden, irrational physical pull to jump into it. But it gets even deeper than just a translation error in the nervous system. The research connects this acoustic pressure to something I had never heard of. HERVs, human endogenous retroviruses.
This is where we cross from physics into genetics.
Roughly 8% of the entire human genome is not human. It is made up of ancient viral DNA.
It's staggering. Millions of years ago, a retrovirus infected an ancient mammalian ancestor, spliced its code into their DNA, and it just stayed there.
And it gets passed down from generation to generation. But we aren't all walking around constantly sick with ancient viruses, so clearly the body deals with it. How?
It silences the code through a chemical process called methylation. Think of methyl groups as physical padlocks that the body clamps onto the DNA strand right over the viral code. So the cellular machinery reads down the DNA, hits the padlock, and skips over the virus. It keeps the virus completely dormant.
But the padlocks aren't permanent. And this is the terrifying part.
Right.
The notes explain that under extreme chronic stress or intense environmental signal pressure, like sustained infrasound or massive electromagnetic shifts,
The chemical environment of the body changes. Cortisol spikes, cellular energy depletes, and those methyl padlocks start to pop off.
the dormant viral codes wake up. The cellular machinery reads the ancient virus and starts manufacturing its proteins.
And the specific example they use in the forces is HERVW. They have found that in patients experiencing the active onset of schizophrenia, HRVW is highly active in their blood and spinal fluid.
And when this specific viral code activates, it produces a protein called syncytin, which actively degrades the myelin sheath in the brain.
Right. The myelin sheath is the insulation around your neural pathways. Think of it like the rubber coating on a copper wire. It keeps the electrical signal contained.
So if the rubber degrades, the sparks fly everywhere.
Exactly. Signals that should be perfectly isolated start bleeding into adjacent nerves.
So let's put it all together. Your bionav receiver, your physical body, is picking up signals from the planetary wooden plank. Maybe it's a massive weather front, maybe it's the hum of a city.
The signal enters your system.
But because chronic stress has awakened a retrovirus that is degrading your neural insulation, the signal bleeds. The source tagging system fails. The brain receives a massive spike of panic, but it has absolutely no idea where it came from.
And that leads directly to what the sources call the self-attribution filter.
This is a huge concept.
It really is. As human beings grow from infants into adults, our brains are forced to build a developmental filter. Its only job is to stamp the word mine-e on every single thought, feeling, or sensation that crosses our conscious awareness.
My anxiety, my inner voice, my sudden urge to jump.
Right.
But if we are a modular distributed system coupled to a planetary wooden plank, constantly intercepting external electromagnetic and acoustic signals, and occasionally experiencing internal viral code activations that degrade our routing.
Labeling all of that as mine is a catastrophic misattribution.
It is a systemic failure of identification.
Completely.
And here is the major glaring flaw in modern cognitive therapy frameworks, according to this research.
Oh, yeah.
If someone is suffering from severe intrusive thoughts, or they are intercepting a heavily coupled environmental signal that is flooding them with dread, what does a therapist usually say?
They say, these are just your thoughts. You are generating them. You need to own them, examine them, and reframe them.
Right. But by telling the patient to own the intrusive thought, the therapy is actually reinforcing the broken filter. You are instructing them to take full identity ownership of a signal that originated entirely outside of their conscious generation.
You are forcing them to identify with the noise of the system.
It's like blaming the radio for the bad song it's picking up from the station.
That is a great way to put it. It suggests that mental health might not purely be a psychological or a brain problem. It might be a clamping architecture problem across the full modular substrate of the body. The biological filters that are supposed to block out the planetary noise or the methyl padlocks that suppress the ancient viral codes are structurally failing.
Okay, this is a massive paradigm shift.
This is.
If human consciousness is essentially just a biological rendering engine, constantly trying to process and display all these external signals, internal viral codes, and planetary phase spaces, what is the actual mechanism of that rendering? Like, how does reality actually update from 1 second to the next?
Well, to explain that, we need to look at the three primary fabrication systems, the three distinct ways that any complex system can render reality or imagery.
Right. And the first two are pretty intuitive if you've ever worked in graphic design or lighting. First, you have RGB, red, green, blue.
The additive system.
Yes. You start with a completely black screen, zero energy, zero light. You add red, green, and blue energy until you build up to the reality you want. If you add them all perfectly, you get white light.
But it costs massive amounts of energy to build from nothing.
Right. And on the opposite side, you have CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black.
The subtractive system.
This is how ink on paper works. You start with white paper, which represents the full, unconstrained spectrum of light reflecting back at you. Then you add the ink as filters. You strip away wavelengths, subtracting possibilities, until you get down to the specific image or all the way down to black.
But the human brain and reality itself cannot possibly rebuild itself from scratch every single millisecond using RGB.
That would require infinite energy.
Exactly. And it doesn't filter down from a blinding white light every second using CMYK. So the research proposes a third system, delta rendering, or differential rendering.
From an energy conservation standpoint, this makes total sense. Delta rendering doesn't rebuild the whole room you are sitting in every microsecond. It takes the very last expressed frame, the exact state of the world a microsecond ago, calculates the absolute minimum change required based on your new inputs, and it only renders the difference.
It just renders the phase offset.
I love the modern analogy they use for this. Think about how streaming video works.
Right, like the H.264 video codec.
Exactly. If you're watching Netflix, the codec doesn't send 60 full, brand new, high-resolution pictures over your Wi-Fi every second. If it did, the entire global internet would instantly crash from data overload.
So instead, the codec uses 3 specific types of frames.
Right. First, you have iframes, intercoded frames. These are the heavy ones. They are full, complete picture resets. Every single pixel is drawn.
And in our biological analogy, an iframe is a major trauma, the birth of a child, a near-death experience, or a massive evolutionary leap. It is a total heavy reset of the system's baseline.
Then you have p-frames, predicted frames. These are incredibly lightweight because they only contain the data that changed from the previous frame.
Right.
If you are watching a movie and a character is walking across a static living room, the codec does not redraw the couch or the walls. It only updates the pixels of the character moving. That is delta rendering.
And in our lives, p-frames are normal. Daily continuity. It's why you wake up, and today feels mostly exactly like yesterday. Your brain is just running lightweight p-frames.
And finally, you have b-frames, bidirectional frames.
These are fascinating.
They are, because they look at the past frame, AD, they look ahead at the future predicted frame, and they interpolate the difference. They require the most processing power, but they save the most data space.
And the sources map b-frames to biological flow states, deep meditation, or REM sleep dreaming.
Right, states where your brain is completely unmoored from the present input, pulling from past memory and future predictions simultaneously to render an experience.
But underneath all of this rendering, underneath the iframes and the p-frames, there's a fundamental baseline state that the sources call the zero state.
And here I had to completely rewire my brain because they correct a massive bias in human thinking. Since elementary school, we have been taught by basic math to think of zero as nothing, an empty void. If I have 0 apples, I have nothing.
But in the physics of a ternary system, a system based on 3 states, matter 1, 0, and +1, the zero state is emphatically not empty.
Yeah.
Let's define the poles first.
Okay.
A 1 is a collapsed, completely rigid state. A +1 is a highly active, synchronized, structured state. But the zero state sitting in the middle is superposition.
But 0 literally means nothing. How can nothing be superposition?
Because we are confusing thermodynamics with quantum mechanics.
Ah, okay.
Quantum mechanics proves that the vacuum of space isn't an empty void. It's a boiling quantum foam of virtual particles continuously popping in and out of existence. The zero state contains maximum information density.
Like the paint bucket analogy.
Yes. Imagine a bucket of paint. If -1 is pure black and +1 is pure white, the zero state isn't an empty bucket. It is a bucket with every single color in the universe poured into it and mixed together.
It contains every possibility, but it has 0 constraints, meaning no specific reality has been chosen yet.
Exactly. So when a biological system or a society or a person drops into a zero state, when they feel totally lost, unmoored, or in crisis, they aren't actually dying or failing.
They are returning to maximum potential.
Right. But the problem is, systems cannot survive permanently in the zero state. The sheer anxiety of infinite possibility is too much. They have to collapse into a defined reality. They have to fall into an attractor basin.
An attractor basin is exactly what it sounds like. Imagine a 3D topological map, like a landscape of hills and valleys. If you drop a ball onto this map, gravity will naturally pull it down the slope until it settles at the bottom of the deepest valley.
That valley is an attractor basin.
It is a stable, low-energy state. Habitual behaviors like biting your nails, massive societal norms like shaking hands, biological rhythms like a heartbeat, these are all attractor basins. The system naturally wants to fall into them to save energy.
So what does this all mean? How does a system get stuck in a bad basin? Like, why is it so incredibly hard to break a bad habit? Or why is it so difficult to heal from PTSD? If the brain is just updating p-frames, why can't it just update out of the trauma?
Because of a physical property called hysteresis.
Exactly. Hysteresis is path-dependent memory embedded deep in a physical substrate.
Path-dependent memory. Okay, I'm going to need an analogy for that.
In simple terms, it means that the path a system takes to get from point A to point B is not the same path it takes to get from point B back to point A. The journey itself physically deforms the landscape.
Like a mattress.
Yes, imagine your nervous system is a memory foam mattress. If you press a bowling ball into it, it creates a deep depression and a tractor basin. When you remove the bowling ball, the mattress doesn't instantly snap back to perfectly flat.
The groove remains for a long time.
Exactly. So if you experience a severe psychological trauma, it's not just a bad memory playing on a movie screen in your mind. The trauma acts like a massive bowling ball dropped onto the topological map of your actual nervous system.
It creates a literal physical groove, a deep, highly deformed attractor basin.
Right. Your nervous system physically remembers the path to panic, and now that path of least resistance is the easiest valley for your brain to fall into every single time you encounter stress.
That makes so much sense. And the most terrifying part of this research is that hysteresis scales up. It doesn't just happen to an individual nervous system, it happens to entire populations. The hysteresis curve of a whole city can be deformed.
The 1518 dancing plague.
Yes. The perfect historical example of population-scale hysteresis deformation.
Paint the scene for us, because this sounds completely made up, but it is deeply documented history.
It really does sound fake. Okay, so in 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, France, one woman steps into the street and starts dancing wildly. Within a week, dozens join her. Within a month, hundreds of people are dancing uncontrollably in the streets, day and night.
Until their feet are bleeding.
Yes. And some literally died of cardiac arrest and exhaustion. It sounds like mass insanity. But look at the context.
Context is everything. You have to look at the state of the wooden plank.
The environment.
Right. The population of Strasbourg had been suffering through years of brutal famine, waves of deadly disease, and extreme apocalyptic religious anxiety. They believed God was actively punishing them.
So the collective attractor basin of that entire city was completely deformed by chronic, unrelenting stress.
The collective hysteresis curve was primed, the basin walls were flattened, the entire city was sitting on a nice edge of a zero-state superposition.
And then one single person, for a trophea, enters a dissociated, uncontrolled motor state. She drops into a trauma basin and starts dancing.
And because the entire population is so densely coupled, they're sharing the exact same stress hormones, the exact same visual field, the exact same acoustic rhythms of the cobblestone streets.
The signal instantly spreads. The coupling takes over.
And suddenly, dozens of people lock into this new attractor basin.
And here is the truly terrifying part of the math. Once enough people are trapped in the basin, the collective field becomes self-sustaining. If you are a peasant in Strasbourg and you want to stop dancing, you aren't just fighting your own exhausted brain anymore.
You are fighting the electromagnetic and acoustic broadcast pressure of hundreds of coupled nodes, all physically trapped in the same basin.
It is a collective attractor hijacking. To exit the basin requires an iframe reset that is stronger than the entire crowd's broadcast.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of the state machine.
Right. If all these potential states, these p-frames and these massive attractor basins exist, where is the data actually kept? Where does a universe store its possibilities?
The sources call this ultimate storage system the loom.
The loom, the master lookup table, a LUT. Think of it as a dynamic cache system or the ultimate hard drive of reality. If you have an unexpressed possibility, say, a choice you didn't make yesterday, that data doesn't just poof into non-existence.
It is compressed and cached in the loom.
And it waits there in superposition until a matching attractor basin, a specific environmental condition, pulls it out of the cache to be rendered into reality.
And the loom isn't just an abstract concept. It has a physical grid.
This part is fascinating.
The resolution limits of the universe's rendering engine are defined by our fundamental physical constants. Planck's constant, the speed of light, the fine structure constant.
Physicists have always wondered why these numbers are what they are.
In the loom theory, these aren't just arbitrary math. They are the literal index space of the cache.
So Planck's constant is the literal minimum viable pixel size of reality. And the speed of light is the maximum propagation speed of a delta update across the server.
Precisely. It is the architectural constraint of the rendering engine.
Okay, so if reality is essentially a massive biological and physical software rendering through the loom using delta updates and attractor basins, the obvious question is, have human societies figured out how to hack this?
Oh, definitely.
If you know the code, can you manipulate the machine?
The answer is absolutely yes. Across the globe, different cultures have mapped this exact state machine. They just use incredibly different vocabularies.
It is a truly universal architecture. If you look at West African Ifa tradition, they use a system called the 256 Odu matrix. It is a highly precise mathematical system mapping all possible states of superposition.
And in their framework, the entity known as EO acts exactly as an entropy node.
He is the phase shifter.
Right. When a society or a person is trapped in a rigid dead attractor basin, EO injects chaos to force the system into a zero state, forcing a reset.
Or look at Indian Shaivism. Thousands of years ago, they map this. They talk about spanda, which translates roughly to the micro-vibrational pulse of reality oscillating between states.
For rapid P-frame updates.
Yes. And they describe Kanyukukas, which are the constraint layers. The Kanyukukas act exactly like CMYK filters. They limit our degrees of freedom, forcing the infinite potential of the zero state into a linear, sequential, limited human reality.
Even modern French post-structuralist philosophy maps this exactly. Philosophers like Deleuze and Guattari analyze society as a thermodynamic machine.
They look for what they call lines of flight, these intentional ways to escape the dominant societal attractor basins, like capitalism or strict social norms.
They advocate for creating ZADs, or temporary autonomous zones, which are essentially communal attempts to live purely in the high plasticity, unconstrained zero state.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because while philosophers try to map it to free people, state militaries and governments have figured out how to weaponize it to control people.
And this is where we have to talk about Russian reflexive control.
This isn't just dropping propaganda leaflets over a city. This is applied mathematical cybernetics.
Russian military theorists don't just guess at psychology. They use literal mathematical equation reflexive polynomials to sculpt the probability field of their adversaries.
They understand the core rule of the state machine. You don't control an enemy by giving them direct orders.
You control them by subtly altering their internal mathematical model of reality, so they freely choose the exact action you want them to take.
They feed conflicting, high-entropy data into a target population. They push out true stories, obviously fake stories, absurd conspiracy theories, and contradictory evidence all at the exact same time.
This triggers what the cybernetics researchers call a threading conflict in the target's self-monitoring layer.
The population's P-frame rendering engine overloads. The people become completely exhausted, deeply anxious, and they collectively drop into a zero-state crisis.
They literally do not know what is real anymore. The basin walls flatten.
And right at that exact moment of maximum superposition, when the population is begging for reality to just make sense again, the controller provides a stable, rigid attractor basin.
A clear, hyper-simple narrative. A strongman leader. A simple binary choice of us versus them.
And because the population is so desperate to escape the agonizing anxiety of the zero state, they willingly and enthusiastically snap into that basin, believing they arrived there through their own logic.
It is pure probability manipulation.
It's exactly like tilting a pinball machine. You aren't reaching through the glass and moving the silver ball with your fingers. You aren't forcing it.
No, you're just subtly shifting the gravity of the entire table. You bump the sides, you alter the slope, so the ball naturally rolls exactly down the drain you chose. The ball thinks it's just following gravity.
That is a perfect analogy. Now contrast that Russian software-level hacking with the German approach to media ecology. German theorists like Friedrich Kittler don't view media as content. They view media as hardware constraints.
They argue that the technical medium itself physically forces biological entrainment.
Think about early broadcast television. The CRT, the cathode ray tube, we tend to focus on what was on TV, the sitcoms, the news anchors. German media ecology says the content doesn't matter. The hardware is what hacked us.
The cathode ray tube literally acted as a time-based oscillator.
It fired an electron beam across the screen at an incredibly precise rhythmic frequency.
It forced millions of isolated human nervous systems, sitting in completely separate living rooms across the country, to visually scan lines of light at the exact same millisecond.
Millions of human biorhythms locking onto a single, centralized electromagnetic pulse. It achieved literal biological entrainment across a massive population.
The hardware dictated the coupling.
And then we have the modern Chinese model, which operates on massive algorithmic governance. The state uses vast natural language processing systems, AI text scrapers, to monitor the social internet as if it were fluid dynamics.
When the AI sees a population shifting toward an unstable zero state, maybe a protest is brewing or a viral anti-work trend is spreading, state doesn't always use blunt force.
They use algorithms to gently ease the population away from the crisis node, tweaking feeds and burying keywords, routing them back into safe, state-approved, productive, +1 attractor basins.
But the citizens fight back, and this is where folk cybernetics comes in. I absolutely love this section of the notes.
Oh, me too. If the state wants you trapped in a highly productive, constantly working +1 basin, how do you rebel? You use a movement called tangping, which translates to lying flat.
You refuse to buy a house, you refuse to get married, you refuse to work overtime. You literally do nothing.
By doing nothing, you drop your individual parameters to absolute zero. You deliberately withhold your biological processing power from the state's machine.
Because the algorithmic machine requires input to function, it cannot extract thermodynamic energy from a node that adamantly refuses to couple with the system.
But they don't just stay silent, they actively glitch the state's NLP text monitors. Since the AI algorithms are trained to instantly identify and censor specific combinations of text characters, the users deploy linguistic phase shifting to evade capture.
They use what is called Martian language.
Imagine looking at a Chinese character. It's built of structural pieces called radicals. The users will literally split the character apart visually on the screen and stitch it back together using Japanese kanji, Cyrillic alphabet letters, and random math symbols.
To the AI text scraper, which operates on strict pattern recognition, the text looks like unparsable white noise. It reads it as pure entropy and ignores it.
But a human brain can look at that visual stack, effortlessly filter the noise, and instantly read the political meaning.
They're phase shifting the data. They also use homophonic phase shifting.
Oh, right. Mandarin is rich with homophones, words that sound completely identical when spoken aloud, but are written with different characters and mean entirely different things.
So if a political term is banned by the censor, they simply swap it for a harmless word that sounds exactly the same.
The classic example in the notes is using the characters for river crab to talk about censorship because they sound almost identical.
The AI scans the post, sees a recipe for a seafood dinner, and lets it pass. The human scans the post, hears the homophone in their head, and sees a biting political critique.
But here's where it gets truly wild. All of this, the pinball machine probability hacking, the hardware syncing of TVs, the phase-shifted language on the internet, it's not just sociology or linguistics.
These exact same mechanics dictate modern hard science, ecology, and weapon systems.
Yes. Let's look at electronic warfare. Specifically, DRFM jamming, digital radio frequency memory. This is pure technical phase offset subversion.
Imagine a fighter jet is flying through enemy airspace. The enemy ground radar sends out an electromagnetic pulse, a sine wave.
The wave hits the jet, bounces off the metal, and echoes back to the radar dish.
The radar's computer measures the exact time and phase of that returning wave to calculate exactly where the jet is. So how does the jet hide?
My initial thought would be just blast a massive siren of radio noise back at the dish to blind it.
That's brute force jamming, and modern radars can filter that out easily. DRFM is much more elegant.
Okay.
The jammer pod on the jet intercepts the incoming radar sine wave. It captures the wave, digitizes it in a fraction of a nanosecond, and then it slightly shifts the phase.
It delays the peak of the wave by just a microsecond and then broadcasts it back perfectly.
Exactly. And because the enemy radar's algorithm strictly relies on precise phase architecture to calculate distance, this tiny microsecond offset completely trips the system math.
The radar algorithm snaps into a fall attractor basin. It renders a ghost aircraft on the screen that is 5 miles away from the jet's actual physical location.
The radar thinks it has a perfect solid lock on a target, but it's locked onto a phantom rendered by a phase shift.
And if we step back and connect this highly technical military application to anthropology, it is structurally identical to indigenous Amazonian perspectivism.
Wait, how does a fighter jet jammer have anything to do with Amazonian shamanism?
Anthropologists studying Amazonian cultures note that they do not view reality as a single objective world filled with different dumb animals. They view objective reality as a universal software and different biological bodies as different hardware.
Oh, I remember this.
Right. In their view, humans, jaguars, and even river spirits all have the exact same internal software. They all perceive themselves as normal people with culture, families, and intentions. But their physical bodies are different hardware rendering engines.
So when a human looks at a muddy swamp, their human hardware renders it as mud.
But a jaguar running predator hardware looks at that exact same swamp and renders it as a great ceremonial house. When a human sees blood, the jaguar's hardware renders it as manioc beer.
Reality is just a phase position.
Exactly. And the shaman's role in these cultures is to operate as a systems engineer. Through intense rituals, fasting, or psychedelics, the shaman temporarily uncouples their software from their human hardware.
They phase shift their consciousness to plug into the Jaguar's hardware so they can see the world from that exact phase position.
But the incredible danger of doing that is getting trapped. The notes say that if the shaman stays coupled to the Jaguar's hardware loop for too long, their software decoheres into that state permanently.
They literally get stuck in the Jaguar's attractor basin.
Which, when you strip away the vocabulary, is literally the exact same mechanic as the electronic warfare jammer tricking the radar node into a false basin.
It's phase offset hijacking, just described through a biological and spiritual lens instead of mathematics.
It is the exact same underlying state machine. And we see these same mechanics actively deployed in modern economics and decentralized computer networks. Think about cryptocurrency blockchains or mesh networks.
They survive against centralized government capture using cryptographic phase offsets.
If a centralized bank server goes down, the whole financial network dies. But in a Git repository for coding or a decentralized blockchain, if there is a massive conflict or an attack, the community doesn't have to violently fight for control of a central node.
They just execute a fork.
A fork is a controlled mutation. They literally copy the entire state space of the ledger up to that exact millisecond, and they split it into a parallel phase position.
It's like creating an alternate timeline.
Yes. Both parallel systems run simultaneously to see which attractor basin gathers more computing power and human belief.
And this maps flawlessly onto complexity economics. Traditional old-school economists treat markets like mechanical steam engines that naturally seek a stable equilibrium.
But complexity economists map global markets as potential wells, attractor basins in a multidimensional topological landscape.
When a market is healthy and booming, it's sitting safely at the bottom of a steep, stable well.
But when severe stress hits, like massive corporate debt bubbles, a global pandemic, or critical resource shortages, the walls of that basin begin to structurally flatten out.
This triggers a measurable mathematical phenomenon called critical slowing down. The market's resistance to shocks drops.
And when the basin walls flatten completely, the market enters a zero-state superposition. It becomes highly volatile and unstable.
A tiny, seemingly random event, a single bank failing or a single cargo ship getting stuck in a canal that normally wouldn't matter at all, can suddenly shake the entire global system out of its routine.
It forces the system to either crash completely or radically mutate into an entirely new economic paradigm. Okay, we've gone from the deepest part of the ocean to the human nervous system to Russian cybernetics to global finance. Let's bring the scope back to the physical Earth.
Because if the Earth is this massive distributed computational system, it needs sensors to process all these changes.
The sources suggest a beautiful metaphor. The Earth has arms deployed, almost like a massive planetary octopus, to read surface data.
The octopus is the perfect biological analogy for the Earth. A centralized human brain wouldn't work for a planet.
Right.
But an octopus has 2/3 of its neurons distributed out in its arms. The central brain in the head just sets a broad intent, like find food. But the arms are semi-autonomous.
They taste the water, they touch the rocks, they problem solve, and they react independently. The Earth's biomes function exactly like these arms.
The deep ocean is the primary processor, running the oldest, most compressed code.
The Amazon rainforest is an arm specifically configured for high-throughput mutation and rapid chemical cycling.
The atmosphere is an interface arm, reaching up to read solar input and shield against cosmic rays.
But the most crucial arm for deep memory is the tundra arm.
The tundra. Specifically, the polar ice caps and the deep Siberian permafrost. They act as a thermally gated crystal memory archive.
A planetary hard drive.
Exactly. An ice crystal is a rigid, hexagonal molecular lattice. When water freezes into that lattice, it perfectly traps the exact configuration of the environment at that specific historical moment.
The isotopic ratios of the oxygen record the exact global temperature. Tiny microscopic bubbles trap the ancient atmosphere.
And the ice locks in ancient spores, pollen, and microbes.
It is a deep cache, and it holds on to that data perfectly, completely insulated from the rest of the planetary system, as long as the temperature stays below the thermal gate.
As long as it stays frozen.
But widespread planetary warming is physically melting the gate.
And in the context of the state machine, when ice melts under massive heat pressure, it doesn't just gradually leak data into the ocean, it undergoes a rapid phase transition. It dumps the entire cache at once.
The researchers describe our current climate situation not just as ecological damage, but as a literal buffer overflow in the planetary computer.
The system is force-reading this ancient data way faster than the biosphere can process it.
We're already seeing this happen in real time. Scientists have found 30,000-year-old giant viruses, like Pithovirus sibericum, being thawed and revived from Siberian permafrost.
These ancient biological configurations are being dumped directly into a modern ecosystem that has absolutely no evolutionary context to receive them.
It is a massive force delta update from a keyframe that is 30 millennia out of date. The P-frames of our current reality are colliding with an I-frame from the Ice Age.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of all this material. We have mapped this massive interlocking architecture of phase spaces, coupling, and rendering engines. But the question remains, why does this actually matter to you, listening to this right now?
Exactly. I want to speak directly to you right now. Why does all this dense architecture, knowing about thermoclines and hysteresis and the zero state, why does it matter to your daily life?
It matters because your attention is the steering wheel of the world machine.
Governments, media platforms, algorithmic feeds, and social pressures are constantly trying to tilt your topological landscape. They are deploying reflexive control and hardware entrainment to drop you into their specific attractive basins to extract your time, your money, and your physical energy.
But once you understand the architecture, you gain agency. By understanding the zero state, by recognizing that a feeling of deep uncertainty and anxiety might not be a failure, but might just be you entering a high plasticity state of infinite superposition, you can pause.
You can breathe, and you can avoid snapping into the first rigid binary choice presented to you by an algorithm.
And by recognizing the existence of your own self-attribution filter, you can fundamentally change your relationship with your own mind.
The next time you feel a sudden wave of dread or an inexplicable intrusive thought telling you to swerve a car or jump off a ledge, you can stop.
You can look at that thought and ask yourself, is this anxiety actually mine? Did I generate this? Or am I just an atrophied biological antenna intercepting a coupled signal from a stressed-out environment?
You do not have to claim ownership of the noise.
And to leave you with one final, truly provocative thought, based on the absolute limits of this research, let's look at the ultimate source of all these signals.
We've talked about the loom, the master lookup table of reality. The sources point to the cosmic microwave background, the CMB.
This is the thermal radiation left over from the very moment of the Big Bang, mapping the incredibly subtle density fluctuations of the early universe.
Most people think of the CMB as just a distant photograph of history, a baby picture of the universe.
But the sources suggest it isn't just history. It is the first lookup table.
It is the original set of prime attractors that dictated where every single galaxy, star, and planet would eventually form.
And because it permeates the entire universe, there are roughly 400 CMB photons vibrating in every single cubic centimeter of space right now.
Including inside your living room, including inside your own body.
We already know that biological systems can utilize quantum coherence. Plants use quantum coherence to achieve near-perfect energy transfer during photosynthesis.
Their cells hold particles in superposition to test all possible paths for sunlight simultaneously.
So the question becomes, what happens if human biological hardware were to perfectly phase lock with the CMB?
If a human being achieved sufficient macroscopic quantum coherence, could a mind, completely stripped of all modern noise, all planetary coupling, consciously tunnel backward into the very first keyframe of the universe?
Could we bypass the broken antenna entirely and plug our hardware straight into the original source code?
That is something for you to mull over the next time you're standing on an edge and you feel that sudden, strange pull. Maybe it's not a call to fall. Maybe it's just the void trying to establish a connection. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.